This one's kind of in between, got a little bit of reddish, which if it's a full red, we would call that a cinnamon bear. And then lastly, we can have blonde bears. There's an even lighter version of this they will call spirit bears. There's actually kind of an endemic population in Alaska, into part of Canada, that's even lighter color than this, the true spirit bear. But all colors and in between, any shade from almost white to black. They can have markings, they can have chest spots, kind of like a sun bear would, stuff like that. And so there's no consistency from one bear to another. Dark muzzle, light muzzle on a lighter dark body, back and forth. Something we see a lot are people calling, well, it was a brown bear, so it must have been a grizzly bear. There hasn't been a confirmed grizzly bear in Colorado since 1979. And so while there's not a 0% chance, it's very, very slim until we confirm that. Otherwise, we're just going to go ahead and say that it's only black bears in Colorado. A little bit about bear biology, just general weight ranges. Males can be anywhere, and this is assuming full grown. Obviously, cubs can be smaller, but males anywhere from 125 to 600 plus. 250 is kind of that average, the sweet spot in the middle. Females 90 to 300 pounds, with 150 pounds being average. And then that can fluctuate between the gender, the season, the food supply. So, this time of year, bears are coming out of hibernation. They've kind of burned all their calories. There could be a lot on the lighter side, as where, in, we'll say September, October, right before they go to sleep, they've been packing on calories all summer long. Into the fall, they're going to be a lot heavier. Some places, so like here, we have a pretty good water supply, so bears can be heavier. There's more food growing. They have better food availability compared to a black bear, say, living in the Southwest in a more desertous terrain where there's less water, so there's less production, less food availability. They will get full grown the same as bears here, but they will just weigh less. They can't pack on quite as many calories. And then a little tidbit, the largest recorded black bear, so depending how you want to look at this, in the lower 48, we had one in 2010 that was documented at 880 pounds. And then there was one harvested by a hunter in New Brunswick, so up in Canada. It was field dressed for consumption, so that means all the internal organs had been removed, and that was officially weighed at 902. So the estimation with had that bear been intact would have been around 1,100 pounds, which is twice the size of any bear I've heard of in Colorado. For whatever reason, the East Coast grows them a lot bigger than we do here out west. Their home range can be anywhere from 10 to 25 square miles. In high food availability, that can be smaller. And I'll add a note, this isn't like, you think of your yard where you've got, you can have your nice little fenced yard. Bear territories or their home ranges are much different. They're more fluid. And so think of the salmon runs in Alaska, where there's a very, very high food availability that can shrink to just a little perimeter around me, my little fishing hole, as where in those more desert terrains, when food is really hard to come by, that area gets a lot bigger. They will defend those territories both for food, for the ability to mate, things of that nature. In the sow's case, from other sows to protect her young. So this kind of home range is not quite what we experience as far as our property boundaries and things that are a little more clear cut. Lifespan anywhere from 20 to 25 years in the wild. There's a collar study, and I believe in Minnesota, somewhere up in that direction. They had a female that was documented to be over 47 years old, which she finally died, which is pretty incredible. We had one harvested here in Boulder that made it, I guess, Boulder area on the forest, but it was the tooth age. Every harvested bear, we take a tooth from to get an age demographic for the harvested animals, and it was 28 years. So they're doing pretty well in the area here, making it kind of the upper reach of their wild lifespan. Size measurements anywhere from 2.5 to 3 feet in height when they're on all fours. So think half the shoulder, and then 4 to 6 feet long. That's if you were to stretch a tape measure from the tip of their nose to the tip of their tail. So when they stand up on their hind legs, they can be a little bit taller, but none really exceeding that 8-foot mark. Then lastly, their sense of smell is pretty incredible. If they are upwind of something, they can smell anywhere from 3 to 20 miles, and downwind is even more. So think about that. That's 7 times better than a bloodhound, which is approximately 100 times better than a human sense of smell. That's kind of what they evolved around as far as how they get food. Do you have a question? Okay, so make sure. So the diet, and we're going to focus on the natural diet. Bears are omnivorous, so they can eat anything from from things they harvest, from killing other animals, to plant matter they're foraging for. Most of it's vegetation, so around 85%. Again, climate and season dependent. They'll eat insects, ants, bees, moths, etc. During the springtime, here in about a month or so, when the deer and the elk and even the moose start calving and fawning, they will kind of have a short time frame where they will shift their focus dietarily to almost entirely looking for fawns and elk calves, just for a very maybe 4 to 6 weeks max. They're opportunistic, so it's not like they're going to turn down something else, but they'll kind of focus on those food sources. They can take down a full-grown deer, possibly an elk, but it's kind of, they're not built for it, and so they don't typically do it, but they can, as well as scavenge other carcasses, whether it's a lion kill, a road kill, this time of year winter kill. If they've come across a carcass that died over the winter but was preserved in the cold, they will feed on that as well. Oh, just more pictures. Bark there, eat ants, bugs, all that kind of fun stuff. Reproductive cycle. So males are capable of breeding around the age of 3. Females somewhere between the ages of 3 and 5, with 5 years old being the most common first breeding cycle for females. Gestation is 2 to 3 months long. The sow produces anywhere from 1 to 3 cubs, and that's over winter when she's in the den. So they're born midwinter. They're less than a pound. They're blind, toothless, and kind of a peach fuzz as far as hair goes. By the time they emerge from the den a couple months later, they're in that 10 to 15 pound range. The males sometimes predate on the cubs, and so females, and we see this in populated areas, they like those fringes more because they will use people as a protective mechanism to keep males away. Bears don't like people, but the female says, if my cubs are safer, I will put up with a heightened sense of human presence to keep my cubs safer. Any questions so far? Online, we're doing good.
Do you have any pictures of the babies?
Not that are in that super cute little fuzzy stage. I don't.
They're too close by.
Yep.
Babies. Just curious.
Do not. We haven't had any good bear studies recently in the area, so we try to keep the local stuff. Hibernation, they can start as early as October, and think of it as a bell curve. So there will be a few that start early, and then as the season gets to that middle ground, you'll have a larger number, and then on the back end, they'll taper off. So we have a few holdouts that'll go a little bit later into December-ish timeframe. They can leave their den as early as March. Typically in Colorado, it's that April into May timeframe. But as we were discussing earlier, locally, we do have several bears out and about. So I would say probably closer to that early April is when they started. This is a little controversial and obviously depends on where. Not a true hibernation. They can wake up throughout the winter. They call it a walking hibernation, where they'll get up, go around and come back. We see that a lot more on the later side, so that January to March time frame, as things, especially in the Front Range here, where we get random 60, almost 70-degree days in January, February. Those temperatures will cue the wake up. Bears will come out, see everything's covered in snow still. They'll do a little walkabout, have a stretch, and end up going back and denning. And then as the season gets progressively warmer and they come out of hibernation, they'll kind of do pseudo, anywhere from 2 week to 3 day, where it's I'm up, I'm eating actively, and then I go into a kind of a torpor state where I'm not really actively getting up every day and moving around. I might be there for 3 days, 5 days a week. But then by this time, we're kind of full blown normal behavior from there. Before we dive into this, or I guess as we dive into this, I didn't specifically have this section put in here about recreating with bears. This is more living with bears. So I want to take a minute to kind of talk more about just general bear encounters. Starting with this, the title of the slide, human bear conflicts. Notice that human is the first word there. Typically things we see is not because a bear has malicious intent or is doing something bad by a bear's standard. It is bad by a human standard. So humans are the initiating factor in this conflict. If human was not there, there would be zero conflict essentially. Bears are just using their nose to fill their belly. So any opportunity that humans give to fill that, they will take advantage of. But think of recreating for a second, or even just like an encounter, whether that's in your yard, whether that's you're out hiking, walking down the road in your neighborhood. They can kind of be anywhere in this general area, much less like Boulder, where it's kind of specific areas you might see a bear. But when you come across them, things to do, don't turn and run away. That can cue a predatory response where the bear would think, oh, that thing is scared of me. I might be able to eat it. I'm going to run it down. if I think I can, and potentially have that as dinner. Just stand your ground, try to look bigger. If you've got a jacket, unzip, unbutton it, hold it out. So that makes you look more bulky, wider. You can lift backpacks up over your head, things of that nature. If you've got your buddy, stand close to each other to make it look like one big bad monster as opposed to two smaller, less formidable monsters in the eyes of the bear. Kids, obviously, you want to have them close. You can put them on your shoulders, have them stand behind you, next to you, whatever's most applicable. Talk to it in a low voice, let it know that you're there. When a bear stands up, that's not an aggressive behavior. Bears don't have the best eyesight, and so that's trying to identify you. They're gaining elevation, get a little more light. They can see a little bit better from an elevated position, and then they have a little bit higher, the way thermals work and scent, they can smell you a little bit better from a little higher off the ground. And so they're trying to figure out what you are when they're doing that. So it's not kind of like a movie thing where the bear stands up and he's all big and bad and scary. It's kind of a, what the heck are you? I'm not really sure what's going on. So that's kind of a really brief overview. Back away slowly, don't run, give them as much area as possible. If you're out hiking around and you know to be in an area that has bears, bear spray, air horn, walking stick, keep pets on a leash, keep your headphones out. That's a lot of wildlife related conflict on trails we see, is because people are in their own little world with their headphones in, not focusing on what's literally everywhere else except for on the trail. So we'll kind of put a pin in that. Does anybody have any specific questions to recreating, camping, living with bears, et cetera, that's outside of, we'll dive more into the living part, but more the when I'm not at home aspect. Anybody online real quick?
Nope.
Cool. If anything comes up, feel free to interject. We'll keep rolling here. So conflicts, there are going to be different kinds of conflicts and kind of ways to prevent them, and then mitigate them hopefully after the fact. So livestock and apiaries, we don't see a lot of beehives up this high. We see that more in the foothills and lower, but it's not just Winnie the Pooh that likes honey. All bears like it. It's a calorie source, right? We try to cut sugar out because it's not good for us. Bears are all about packing on the calories. That's their game from when they wake up to when they go to sleep. It's how can I get more calories in the system? So pure sugar and honey is a really big draw. But they can be very destructive for somebody who's trying to, anywhere from hobby to have a commercial business with hives, can be pretty destructive. More locally here, livestock is a bigger thing. Hobby livestock, especially through COVID, kind of more self-reliance. We see a lot of that, especially in this area, whether it's chickens, rabbits, goats, sheep, all those are fair game for a bear. You think in nature, a deer has the ability to run away. Deer are pretty quick, they're agile. A bear can go pretty fast, but not for very long. And so he thinks, okay, that deer ran away, I'm not going to chase it down. That's not a food source. Compared to a sheep, looks kind of like a deer, a little bit minier version, a little easier to tangle with. Also, it's not running away. It's just sitting in this little square of a pen that it has. And so if you're not taking steps to protect that, you should almost expect a negative encounter with the bear as it relates to livestock. The same can be said for pets. They can kind of be slipped in this category as well. If a bear's in your backyard for who knows what reason, at night you let your dog out because it's your nightly routine to go to the bathroom. Dog runs out expecting the freedom of the yard. Bear's right there and they tangle. It may be a defensive response on the bear, but it can have a negative impact on the pets. So kind of keeping that in the back of your mind as well. So how to protect that, specifically to livestock. Electricity is one of our biggest tools against bears as far as electric fencing goes. It's a foreign experience to them. They can't experience that in nature. The one time they can have that is if they get hit by lightning, and that's more than likely fatal. So it's not like a bear can go out in nature and be shocked and get used to that. It's a very novel experience. And so when it thinks, oh, here's a food source, but I got electrocuted and I didn't like that, it hurt, it felt weird, depending how much voltage it gets, it's a very good deterrent for bears. I will say there's probably nothing that we've come up with so far that is 100% effective, but that has been the most effective. That's anywhere from beehives to a small chicken enclosure that you have a little electric fence around, to a larger sheep or goat pasture with that. And that's not just bears, that's all predators, from a fox on up, they can help protect against that. So if you're going to keep those types of animals up in this area, have a plan when, whether it's a bear, a mountain lion, all the way down to like a raccoon comes knocking, especially for chickens. They're kind of the biggest, everything wants to eat them. as far as the wild predators go. Have a plan on how to protect them. Otherwise, expect something bad to happen on the later end. Bird feeders, this includes hummingbird feeders. A lot of people, for some reason, think of bird feeders as seed only and hummingbird feeders as separate. So I tell somebody to take the bird feeders down because it's attracting the bears. They will take all the seed feeders down and leave the hummingbird feeder out. Again, it's sugar water, much like our honey source. It's calories. It's like us drinking a soda to a bear. So they're going to enjoy that just as much as the seed. And so it's all inclusive. This is the biggest problem we see to start. A bear could be in one of the most remote places, around, come across somebody's cabin or something that has a bird feeder out, and think of this as kind of the gateway into bigger human bear conflicts of, I came in near proximity to humans, I got a food reward. And so in my mind, I think, aha, people equals food that time. Somewhere down the road, it happens again and again and again, and suddenly that connection's made. It's a learned behavior, but it can progress. Okay, well, I was 30 feet from this people, smell, sound building, and I found it. So then I get a little closer, and then I find the barbecue grill or the trash or the pet food, and on down the line to the point where a bear is comfortable enough with humans aren't scary anymore. I will go into a car, into a cabin, etc., a house, even an occupied structure. And so that's what we want to avoid. Everybody, especially in the mountains, loves to watch the birds. Everybody I see online, everybody has the word spreads like wildfire when the first scout hummingbirds come through, stuff of that nature. And that's great. I like seeing birds too, but there's a responsible and an irresponsible way to do it. And anywhere from April through Thanksgiving, basically, if you live in this area, it's an irresponsible action as far as bears are concerned to have a bird feeder out. I know that'll disappoint some people. That'll make some people angry as far as those that like having their birds around. If you want an alternative way to do it, having flowers that are naturally attracting birds and then having a bird waterer, both are much less likely to attract a bear and keep that bear safe and wild, while at the same time still bring those birds in that you're trying to enjoy their presence. Questions on that? I don't think the chat bars had any additional ones. All right, this morphs us into bears and vehicles. I don't know when this started, but people keep bringing it up. I don't know if it was an article or something, but there's this idea that if I live in the mountains and my car is clean, if I leave the doors open and allow the bear to go through it to see that there is no food, then that is the easiest way to avoid a car issue with the bear. That has proven to be very not true. What happens is if a door is open, even if there's nothing in the car for the bear, he would have left within a minute or two on its own. Bear climbs in, car's rocking around, door closes behind bear. Now bear can't get out, and he's mad or scared or maybe both. And so in his frustration, he proceeds to tear the living snot out of the inside of your car, even though there is no real attractant and maybe some slight odor from something to start with. Your car is still totaled. You see this with rental vehicles a lot, or just folks think, Estes Park, all the rentals there. But even here at Hesse Trailhead, people park along the side of the road and leaving their car overnight while they're backpack camping, in the Indian Peaks. If you leave your windows cracked, if you leave the doors unlocked, if you leave any type of, let's say attractive, because food, people think, oh, if I don't have anything that I would eat, there's nothing here for the bear to come and look at. So think bubble gum, think chapstick, deodorant, toothpaste, sometimes air freshener, right? Anything that a bear smells that he think could be food. We may not think, oh, I'm not going to eat an air freshener, even though it's, some scent like tropical paradise that smells like coconut and whatever else. A bear might think that there's a fudge sundae sitting in the front seat if he smells things like this. So it's the association. Leave it all out, lock everything up. That includes your like a tonneau or a camper shell on a truck, either the flat ones over the bed or the actual raised ones. Same thing with that. I'm like, oh, my cab's clean, I'm good. We left a bunch of junk, and that a bear can tear through those pretty easily. Same thing with the windows. If it's anything, if you think an NFL linebacker with a crowbar, if he can get into it, a bear can get into it. So even just leaving that little tiny crack on your window, he can get his claws in. That gives him enough leverage. We use our hands a lot. Our hand muscles are pretty strong. But on top of that, a bear's walks on theirs all day. So imagine that added strength in your forearms, the way you could rip apart with that. A bear has that strength and will use it. So just for the love of all things, lock the door and keep it clean. Otherwise, your insurance agent is not going to think that this is a average claim. Then unsecured trash, and this one we deal with a lot. And it starts out again, that bird feeder into something like dog food, something of that nature that kind of brings the bear in, and then he finds the trash. And where we throw away a lot of things, right, we were talking earlier, compost can be the same thing, right? It's something that we deem inedible, does not mean that the bear doesn't think it might be edible. Once they figure out that I can go to this one single spot and expend very few calories to ruffle around and get a bunch of calories out of that, well, that's way easier than going miles and miles and miles to collect the same amount of berries, bugs, etc. As far as the caloric value of that. So I'm going to keep going here, and oh man, one night a week, everybody on the block puts theirs out, and I can just go down the row and hit them all. So a lot of issues with bear unsecured trash. If you can or don't already, a bear secure cart, different places, depending who your waste management service is. If you have to take it in yourself, if they will or will not service a bear resistant can, these are all factors that everybody will have to kind of conquer on their own. There's programs out there where you can try to get some help with that. So if that's something you need help with, reach out. We don't want to leave you. This isn't a one-man battle of you versus the bear. If something bad happens, it's how can we help each other, kind of lift each other up to help keep the bear safe and ultimately us safe as well. Secure your trash. Don't leave it out. Trash day, morning of, not night before. Otherwise, the bears can have a heyday. I think that's supposed to be a video that the link is broke. Another thing we see a lot in the mountains, especially with older houses, they don't have any type of forced air conditioning. It gets hot up here in the summertime still, uncomfortably so. And so, okay, I'm going to leave a window open, or I'll leave my door open, but the screen door is closed. That is a welcome mat for a bear, especially if you had any type of delicious thing for dinner earlier that night and the smells are still wafting, even from your secured indoor trash. If there's nothing to stop that bear from coming indoors to find that attracted to it, might as well just leave the door open because they'll find a way in. The same thing, a lot of these weekend cabins are folks that, whether it's camping, whether it's the cabins up here, some vacation homes, we see this, where I'm not here every day. If you don't take stuff out, they will find it, especially once that bear becomes habituated to it. They seek those quieter homes. Nobody's milling about. They think it's easier to get in and get food. So taking all food, everything out when you're not there, and when you are there or not, making sure everything's locked down. Again, that linebacker with a crowbar, right? If he can get in, the bear can. So don't make it easier for them to get in, I guess is the big driving home point here. So yeah, just kind of reiterating a couple of these things: securing your trash, putting your bird feeders away. My mom has this little embroidered kind of decorative piece that's kind of a Christmassy decoration, but it's winter is for the birds. It's a snowman, and the birds are all sitting on his little stick arms and on his hat and carrot nose. So in my mind, every time we see this, that's why I think is winter is for the birds. If you want to put seed out, do it in the wintertime when the bears are asleep. Calorically, that's when birds would need it. I'd also be a proponent of if the bird is here in the wintertime and it can't naturally find enough food for itself, does it really need to be here versus the normal migrations that most birds do? Food for thought. If you are going to put a bird feeder out, do it in the wintertime, not when bears are out. Keeping your vehicle clean. I think we harvest on that one pretty good. Keep your doors locked, close your windows. Keeping your garage door closed. Those of you with kids will run into this a lot, where a kid wants to run it out because his bike or the sprinkler or whatever toy that he has is in the garage. So they want to leave it just cracked so they can open it up, grab it real quick, close it without having to latch it because it's locked and I can't get back in and all that. But while I'm playing down the street with my friends, bear can come along and find a way in. Especially a lot of folks have either trash in their garage or a garage fridge that keeps stuff, or their freezers in their garage, stuff of that nature. Make sure everything's locked up tight. That way the bears can't get in. So if it's there, they will try and find a way in. Homes, windows, and doors, keep those locked. If you have that heating issue, I would strongly encourage you to look at some type of air conditioning, getting that added. I know it's not an easy fix. A lot of these older mountain homes aren't built to accommodate that. There's workarounds that you can keep contained inside without having to go out and about or leave stuff open for bears to get into. Unwelcome mats, and this is one where if you think you may have or you have had issues with bears coming too close, a welcome mat, or unwelcome mat. There's two versions. One is basically a nail board. You put nails through a board where they're, think of a sheet of plywood with a bunch of nails sticking up from underneath. That way there's no way for the bear to step close enough to, say, a door or a window that he can get any leverage to open it, because otherwise he gets poked by, nail, screw, whatever. Pre-COVID, when materials were cheaper, this was a pretty easy thing to do. But now that a sheet of plywood costs way too much, an arm and a leg, it's not quite as feasible, but just an option. If you're needing one, you can kind of slap one together with scrap parts as well and make that work. You can do an electric version of this where you run a wire through just a regular rug or some of the raised platforms. If it has that rubber backing on it, it will work. Anybody wearing shoes can walk over it and not feel that because of how electricity works when they're grounded versus a bear putting his foot on it. He will get shocked. Obviously, if you run around barefoot, if you have pets, if you have kids that run around barefoot, that's something to consider where they might not be the best option for you, but is an option. So just something to consider if it might work for you. And lastly, hazing. This is a really important one that I feel a lot of people drop the ball on. So why is it important? Well, I guess we'll start. What is hazing? Because people are like, well, it's harassment. Well, if the bear is there not doing a natural behavior to start with, I would argue you're not harassing that animal from its normal practices to start with. That's where we go into hazing. You're trying to stop a behavior that is negative to that animal, or in this case, a negative learned behavior. So think, I see a bear, and that doesn't have to be a bear is doing anything wrong, but it's too close for comfort and whatever that is for you. So that's yelling, that's using your air horns, that's banging pots and pans, throwing rocks towards them, using a slingshot with, probably a rock, rubber buckshot. In some cases, we can, if you have a 12-gauge shotgun, we have what we call non-lethal. It's rubber buckshot. So it will hurt, but it will not break the skin. And that's the important thing, where it's more bite and less bark as far as a hazing method. Because if a bear is even, if he's coming towards your bird feeder or he finds himself in your bird feeder, that's when these hazing things need to take place to instill that natural fear that they have of people, just kind of reinforcing it of, this isn't a good thing that you're here getting food, or that you're this close to my house, or you're on top of my car, or fill in the blank. And so I'm going to make it unpleasant for you. Yeah.
Do you think a whistle can be effective? Because I've heard mixed things about
It can be, but so the sound ones, they come with a caveat that, right, if it's all bark and no bite, at some point the bear will figure out, okay, if I come and get into this trash can that's unsecured, and this person comes out and yells at me, and all I have to do is walk around, they go inside and I walk back. That's a level of annoyance I can put up with, versus the first time I get yelled at, it might really scare me as a bear. And so that can be more effective then. So it's kind of the timeline, and how often it's used, and kind of the intensity. If it's, hey bear, go away, versus me yelling at the top of my lungs, hey bear, get out of here.
Yeah.
In a more aggressive, assertive manner. Those two alone are very different things. So a little, some of the whistles, that's barely a kind of whistle versus I can put my fingers in my mouth and get really loud. I mean, two different versions of that. So can be whistle, probably not the best. That's why we recommend those air horns, just because I've never met anybody that can sit there and comfortably have that air horn discharge in their proximity and not do this. And their hearing is approximately what ours is. So it's not any better or worse, just kind of around, maybe slightly better. If it hurts our ears, it hurts their ears. Sometimes the suddenness of things. So it's not, think of if, you have a generator running, for example, and it's all the time, it's just kind of, it becomes white noise in the background where that's the base level and it's not considered something new or different. So a shock out of that, if out of the blue, a generator turns on where it was very quiet, now that noise level increases, could be a bit of a start for bear. A couple of things I want to note that toward them, we're not necessarily always trying to hit the bear. Sometimes they need it, that little, like I said, a little more bite in your bark, but just making it uncomfortable. They want to hang out because it meets their their light needs, their food needs. You know, it's quiet enough, it's dark enough, or peaceful enough. Taking any of those aspects away make a bear less comfortable. So think even if you're asleep, motion detecting lights, again, they can get used to it, but the first couple times it's weird, it's different, they're not comfortable with it. Same thing if you're having issues with the bear, a radio, something that's, you know, maybe not smooth jazz, something that's peaceful, but maybe something a little more abrasive, some louder sports talk where they get a lot of highs and lows as far as the voice goes. You know, maybe not your favorite music program, but it's something that if it bugs you, it might bug the bears. So just ways to kind of make the bear uncomfortable and leave is what we're trying to accomplish here. I encourage you to get creative. I've heard some reports of using like a garden hose or a squirt gun with some effectiveness. They call them like predator lights. They've had mixed reviews on those as it relates to bears. A little more effective on different species. But one of my favorite ones is someone had a garbage can that they were trying their best to secure it, but it wasn't a bear resistant can. And so this bear kept coming back in the fall around Halloween. So they took one of the motion activated Halloween decorations that when you walk by, it starts laughing evilly and dancing around. And they had one of their, you know, like their porch camera pointed at their trash can. And I've never seen a bear react so instantly, like rolled over backwards, freaked out about this thing. And so getting creative can definitely yield big things. And let us know if you try something that's kind of out there, but it worked really well. Let us know, because we don't have all the perfect answers for every situation. So the more tools you guys can give me as far as ideas, things that have worked, then I can turn around to the next person and say, hey, I haven't tried this, but this person did. All the stuff I know that usually works isn't working for you. Try this one. Somebody else had success with it. So again, kind of that hive mentality of, I know a lot of things, but I don't know all the things. And so if you guys have new experiences that are helpful for me in my everyday as it relates to bears and conflicts, you know, share those with your neighbors, share those with me, and kind of help bring the relative floor up a little bit and raise the bar. Yeah.
People told us to pour peppermint oil on the bear and burn it.
Peppermint oil. I've heard of that for mice. I've never heard of that for bears before. I don't know. Depending on, I can see that going one of two ways, right? If it's a strong enough odor that's offensive to them, then they might leave it alone. But I could also see a world where that's an attractive enough smell to them that to be the reverse. So the question for those of you online was someone had said peppermint oil as a deterrent. Don't know about that one. We have used ammonia pretty effectively. You just take just whatever, cut up an old t-shirt, just a bunch of rags and hang those around an area, especially if you've got, you know, say a compost bin that the bear keeps messing with or something like that. You're trying to overpower the odor that's already there and one that's gonna, you know, because you think if you're cleaning something that's got ammonia in it, your nose is burning, your eyes are watering. Same thing on the bear, especially when they've got a much stronger sense of smell. So that's a really good deterrent there. People used to leave like a bag, like a little Ziploc bag. They would hang it or place it in stuff with ammonia in it, because that ammonia will eventually kind of seep out of that. But what we found, we had a few occasions of this where a bear would because it's offensive, right? And so as I'm a bear, things in nature, if I don't like it, I might swipe at it or I might bite it. And so we actually had a few bears get that in their eyes, and we saw like partial blindness from ammonia, full strength ammonia going directly. And that's where the rags are much better, because that is a limited amount of ammonia in that rag versus a plastic baggie of it. So definitely don't use the bags, use the rags. With those though, you have to replenish them. It's not a one and done. It's not, I put it out, I'm good for the year, whatever. I won't have to worry about it until next year. Ammonia evaporates, right? So especially on the warm summer days, maybe only 2, maybe 3 days later, you got to go out and reapply if you're having those issues and trying to utilize that. So again, it can be effective, but it takes the person's part. You know, they have to do their part as far as keeping up on it to keep that bear away. But again, we're trying to create space between people and bears to keep both safe. Kind of talked about this, but just to really drive the point home, think of this as kind of how things go from a bear being born in the wild and never seeing a person to it breaking into a house. So on the low end here, kind of like I said, our gateway, our birdseed and hummingbird feeders, something in proximity to humans that kind of starts to break down that barrier of I'm not as afraid of people. Kind of the next step, trash, a little bit closer to the house, sometimes in a shed or a garage. It's food. I got close to the house. I found a food source. I want to keep going that. It's easy. And I want to do what's easy to fill my stomach, right? If there's somebody that's going to next door open up a grocery store, or are you going to drive all the way across town to go get the same food? Probably not. Especially when you've got to pay for gas or you got to ride your bike. And it's a caloric expense. Bear's the same way. Anything that's easy and tastes good, I'm going to get it. I use my nose, I find it, and I use my really powerful, strong paws to find a way in. Things, this is kind of an in-between one where napping, hanging out on a deck or near a house. Again, the bear's presence alone isn't necessarily an issue, but the fact that it's showing that it's comfortable being close to people for extended periods of time, that's something we don't want, because that can lead to other things. So that's a really key time to haze it up. Even if, let's say, you don't have any bird feeders that have ever been gotten into, you've never had any trash, your chickens are secure, you've got everything on lock, but the bear decides that your porch is a great place to take a nap. You might be doing those things down the street somewhere, and your house is just the next closest spot where it's got the nice shade tree in the neighborhood or something, or you're kind of on the point of the hill where he gets a nice breeze throughout the hot afternoons, whatever it is. The fact that he's not afraid of people, that's what we're concerned about, right? And so we want to add that to your back, and that's when a good opportunity to haze too. Again, bear walking down the road, even if it's at night, you're driving down the road and you see a bear. Everybody wants to just, no matter where it is, they see a bear, they want to stop and start taking pictures, flip, their camera, their phone comes out. And instead of doing what they should, they're more focused here and on the picture they're capturing of the bear, and less about the bear itself and what they should be doing to help that bear out. So late at night, even see a bear on the road, honk your horn at it, right? Make sure it's a road is not a safe place for a bear to hang out, right? If you get hit, killed that way, cause a car accident, things of that nature. So these little things go a long way, and the more of them everybody does, the better off the bears will be in the long run. So next step, kind of, we talked about this, getting into sheds and outbuildings. That's the next step of, it smells like people and it's a structure that I have to physically force myself into. Although we discussed, if you're not doing your part, you left the door open, you left the window open, bear can find a way in. You didn't really do your part, and that's how this happened. Versus the bear being, again, that concept of a malicious act. Bear just wants to eat. That's all he's looking for. And see, if he thinks there's food, they'll go in. So we need to do our part to try to keep that physical barrier separate, or to keep that bear separate from the food source. And then ending up and entering a home, right? That's kind of the worst case scenario. Because policy-wise, as a CPW officer, when a bear enters a home, that's showing me that there's zero regard for human presence. And that's the most dangerous situation for a human. That's not to say that every bear that breaks into a house is going to hurt somebody, but I also have a responsibility to keep people safe. And unfortunately, the bears will always lose when those two things come to head like that. And so that's why we do this type of talk, why we do this education, why we really want you guys to contact us before things are too late. Again, example of a bear a little too close to comfort. So again, it's working together, whether that's talking with your neighbors, working with neighbors, your community, kind of going from there. As we go, we want to have a stopping point, right? If the bear gets to here, we don't want him to go past any further down this road of worsening behavior, right? Anytime we can stop it before that, it's better for the bear and better for people. It's a little bit about how we manage bears. So monitoring and direct management. Some people are frustrated where they call and they report a bear, and it's good information to have. But if you live somewhere, let's say behind your house is Forest Service, or you're along a creek bed or something, and you see a bear, that is great information for me to have, but that is not something I'm going to run out on my day-to-day and address immediately. If there's you didn't get into a bird feeder, you didn't get into trash, I just saw a bear. Good, I know that bear is in that area at this time. And we can track that. If things get worse over time, that tells me what I need to do in my job as far as education. I've got some more advanced hazing tools I get to use that the average everyday person doesn't get to. And so that's kind of the monitoring. I'm not going to do something immediately, but I also can't do anything about something that I have no idea is happening. So reporting is really key here. And all the way on the other end of that spectrum is direct management. Now, sometimes that's a relocation. Sometimes that's I have to euthanize a bear. And those are the worst days on the job for me. I don't want to have to euthanize a bear. And unfortunately, every time I do, it's because people back me into that corner along with that bear and left us no other option. So those are the spectrum, and a lot of this falls in between of that. So public education engagement, whether that's, sometimes, maybe you don't want to be the one that goes and talks to your neighbor, but you see that your neighbor leaves her trash out. And you see the evidence every morning, there's trash strewn everywhere. Maybe sometimes just a raccoon, but maybe one night you come home and you see a bear in that trash. If you can't talk to him, that's fine. That's part of my job. Let me go talk to him. But again, I can't go talk to him if I don't know that that is an issue. And so it goes back to reporting. I'm going to be saying this a lot to try to drive home the point. Holding more events like these, if you have an HOA or a community meeting or something of that nature, a neighborhood barbecue where you want us to come talk, awesome. Like one that lets us meet more of you guys, hear about other wildlife stuff, that lets us kind of be on the ground of, I'm talking to you and you're telling me about your issue, and I can kind of give you some information, but if we walk, well, here, let's just go look. I'm 2 houses down. We walk over and I can see on the ground your specifics. I can make more recommendations because I can physically see what we're dealing with, not conceptually, but physically see it. So all these things go to helping bears and helping you guys out. Kind of hit on the conflict policy. We've got different, in our policy, there's different kind of classifications of, we'll call it negative bear behavior. Again, it's human bear conflict. So the bear learns a behavior that we as humans consider negative. So we've got like what we call a nuisance. That's, well, he was in my trash. Well, he's in my bird feeder. Knocked over my barbecue grill because I left the grease trap out. Again, recurring theme, human bear conflict. So that gets a nuisance category where we have a big range of things we can do with it, right? We can talk about hazing. We can do some of this education. We have some volunteers we can involve. We can focus on the community so we can all kind of focus, bring that bottom bar up on how we're helping to mitigate any type of attractions we have. And the other end of the spectrum is what we consider a dangerous bear, and that's when that bear, one, displays aggressive behavior. So even if he hasn't broken in a house yet, but you go to haze a bear and that bear is so unafraid of people that not only does he not run away, he turns around and tells you in his bear way that, no, I'm king of the hill here and I'm going to stay that way. That's a really bad news for that bear. That's trending the wrong direction. So any dangerous bear, that includes breaking into houses, couple of things. And so when those bears reach that dangerous behavior and designation, that's when I'm out of options, right? There's not anything I can do for that bear that's going to fix this. We're too far down that spectrum. There's no going back. And so that's where we don't want to get to. So in that nuisance phase, that's when, again, reporting, letting us know, getting education, whether that's for you or for people that need it, helps us keep on this side of that spectrum where that bear is safer and none of us as people have to deal with the potential negative outcomes of that bear and its learning behavior. So volunteers, we have volunteer programs related to bears, just called Bear Aware, where volunteers are out educating folks about bears, whether it's at education events like this, we do farmers markets, again, neighborhood barbecues, that type of stuff. If we need to go door to door in kind of an area, we can do that as far as the education component goes. Flip side of that, one, you can volunteer through CPW if you're looking for a way to help out your community, or two, even if you're not a CPW volunteer, if you educate yourself and you see a need, fill the need, and help educate your neighbors, whether that's putting on a program at a neighborhood barbecue or something of that nature, or just, hey, I saw Bob down the street, we met at the mailbox, he told me about a problem he's having with a bear. Well, here, I went to this talk, I heard about this, yada, yada. Here's a solution to the problem we're facing that doesn't involve Tyler having to come and kill a bear. That's what we're trying to avoid. Again, hazing. There's no bad hazing. Any attempt to do so is better than no attempts if there's any. And finally, law enforcement. There's being an officer, we have written in specifically to bears. If somebody is negligently providing an attractant that's an issue, phase-wise, we can write multiple tickets, but it has to start out with a warning. I can't write a cold ticket. But if Bob down the street, he throws parties every weekend, and there's food, and there's beer, and there's just everything left out on the lawn, and the bears are finding that, and you get up there the next morning for your morning walk or taking the kids to school or whatever, and you see the bear going through all Bob's trash from the weekend. If that's a reoccurring issue, then let's nip that in the bud. I can go have a real serious talk with Bob and we can get that corrected. And if not, I'm gonna start writing him tickets. That's what tickets are for, is to change of behaviors. Just like we're hazing the bear, it's as close as I can get to hazing a person. There's no intent behind it. It's just we want to change the behavior that's making things bad for bears. So we can do that as well. We like to try everything else first. But again, I can have that real serious talk with Bob that maybe has a lot of education and ideas on how he can haze and how he can help secure attractants. But if it happens again and Bob's not doing what he needs to do, I can't write a ticket. Again, I'm going a little bit out of order here, which is why it's important. Again, going back to reporting, if somebody doesn't call in, then it keeps happening, it doesn't get better. If they do report it, what I want to get away from, there's this kind of stereotype, I guess, or preconceived notion that if I call CPW about a bear problem, they're just going to show up and kill the bear. That's the opposite of the truth. I want every opportunity to not do that. So having these types of events in the community help me, because I can get out and tell you guys, I don't want to kill the bear, so help me not do that. So reporting it earlier, if it happens 10 times and then you report it, that bears learn that behavior, versus if you call the first or second time, it's a lot easier. Again, more tools in the toolbox that we can use to address the issue before we're left with only one option. So I can give folks more effective ways to haze, utilize some of more of our advanced tools between me as an officer and the hazing tools that I have, both on the belt and in the truck, volunteers and that education component to really help drive that forward. Instead of, you guys are interested in bears, maybe you've had an issue with bears, maybe you just want to learn more about it. So it's good that you're coming, but maybe you're not the ones that need to be here listening to stuff I'm saying. And so that's where reporting can help me identify kind of build it and they will come. I built it, not everybody came, so now I have to go out there and do that education on site, which is fine. But again, I need that information to act on, as opposed to I can't act on information I don't have. Again, neighborhood themes, types of conflict, that kind of stuff. This is just an example as far as reporting. So we, as CPW, anytime you get on the phone and you call, whether it's me or Sam or the Denver office, which is our closest one for you guys here in the net area, and say, I XYZ, I saw a bear, it was doing this, whether that's nothing or that was something severe. Anytime we get a report, we have an incident recording app. This is what it looks like on our end. Where you call, we take your address, your name, phone number for you, any pictures we have so we can identify the bear, and a description of what happened. Whether it's, I was driving down the street at 5:30 in the morning on my way to work and I saw a bear. Cool, we want to know about that. It goes in here. Or I was out camping and I got bluff charged by a bear. It was a female with a cub. Okay, I understand why that bear did that. Let's talk about how we can avoid that in the future. All the way to the extreme of, I was out letting my dog out or whatever, and maybe I was attacked by a bear or something, and on the extreme side of that things. Bears rarely attack people, but it's not a 0%. It does happen, and so that's the other end of the spectrum. All that is to say, all this information goes in here, and it helps us track trends. I mean, in this, I'm more of a physical. I got to see it, I can see the picture of it, and so I can see, okay, we had a few here around Eldora. We had kind of an issue in Tolan. Is that close enough for that bear to be the same? But think of an average Netherlands summer between the amount of people we have from out of town coming up to enjoy, Hesse, 4th of July, Indian Peaks, hanging out in town, or just local residents, and kind of the swing you see throughout the year as it relates to wildlife. I guarantee that not every bear sighting, incident, et cetera, was called in. This is everything that we got for 2022 from January 1st to December 31st. I think there's less than 20 instances on here. So that just goes back to the point of reporting is important, and it may not garner a huge response immediately, but over time we can see what we need to do and where we need to go to address the issue. Again, if it's not being reported, we can't do anything about it. And so I just wanted to give that kind of representation of, I'm not saying you guys aren't doing what needs to be done, but as a community, we can do better, right? The information flow could be improved upon. Another thing we see, community involvement, a lot of finger pointing of, well, it's not my fault. you know, the bear was sleeping in my yard, but he didn't do anything in my house, but I know Bob down the street or Judy across the way, you know, whatever the case may be, it's their fault because they're doing this thing. But at the same time, when there's a finger pointed at somebody else, remember there's several pointed back at you. What could you be doing? Could I be helping them with education? Could I be calling Tyler and being, hey, they might need to have a little conversation about how to live with bears a little bit better. All these things, you know, in town, if it's, you know, in an alleyway and let's say 4 trash cans are getting hit, but there's only one that the bear's getting into, then well, it's then their fault because they're not securing their trash. That may be true, but again, how can you help? Remembering you're a part of this too, and we all can help each other. You know, we're not on an island up here. It's not every man for himself. So again, it's not just the tourists. We get that one a lot too. Like, well, it's always the tourists that just come up here and I see evidence to the contrary. So just remember that we're all in this together, you know, in a community sense of not only those who live here, but those who recreate here. As far as bears are concerned, we all have an obligation to help each other out on behalf of the bear, because the bear will always lose if we don't do our part. Again, educate neighbors, hold them accountable. Hey, Bob, I think you told me you're going to clean that up and it's still not done. When's that going to get done? Again, reporting negligent neighbors to CPW, report human bear conflicts to CPW. The earlier it's reported, the more minute things that are reported, the more we can do to help this bear long-term. What oftentimes happen and why that stereotype exists of, oh, CPW just shows up and kills the bear. Well, yeah, because it's been doing the same thing for 3 months now and nobody called about it. And now there's nowhere for me to go, but you know, we've passed all the other forks and exits off the road, right? We're at the end, there's no other option. So help me avoid that and help your neighbors avoid that as well. All right. With that, I want to thank everybody. I know we're a little bit shorter than what was promised, but I want to open the floor up for conversation. I'll say it's partly by design, but I want to allow you guys to ask pointed questions on this happened to me, how should I have, or how could I have better handled this, or you're seeing a need in the community for something I can do better related to bears. Here's your contact for your local guys. I'm Tyler. Sam couldn't make it tonight. He's dealing with some other stuff, but he's the other Boulder/Ned officer. So we're your local go-tos. You can contact us by phone or email. We can take a picture of that, send it to your friends, family, whoever. If farther they are away from Nederland, though, the less likely we are to have as big a response. So if they live out of state, definitely don't be telling them to call us for info. Our regional office, that's down in Denver. That's their phone number. That's Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, normal business hours, especially if there's an emergent need. So think there is a bear here now. It doesn't have to be a bear breaking into my house, but there's a bear going through the bird feed, going through the trash. There's a bear here and it needs to be addressed. Colorado State Patrol is who we dispatch through. That's their non-emergency line, but that's how they get a hold of an on-call officer. There was one of us available by phone 24/7. Sam and I are a part of a group of 8 officers. So if he or I, or it's our day off, or we're out and about doing something else where we can't respond, there is somebody available to help you with these instances that works for CPW. The county will also occasionally respond to this, so they're not a bad one to call. Just know that they're not always the best equipped, but the mountain deputies are usually really good about that. If there's a bear doing something it shouldn't and it needs to be hazed, if they're around, they will help out with that as well. So Boulder County is another one. I don't have their number up here, but I'm guessing you guys know it a little bit better, especially since we're next door. Yeah.
I know that the city of Boulder also hires rangers, and so I'm wondering if you know anything about the main differences between the CPW rangers and the city rangers.
So this is getting out in the weeds a little bit, which is good. But so I'm a wildlife officer and there are parks officers all under the CPW umbrella. So there's a state park, think El Dorado, St. Vrain, Boyd Lake. And so it's same umbrella, just slightly different. So I have a district is where a park ranger has a park.
Okay.
And then us versus say city of Boulder. So Boulder Rangers, so OSMP, they're doing city ordinances on city properties. So they're open space and mountain parks. And then in the case like Boulder Reservoir is a different, it's like Parks and Recreation Department. Yeah. It's similar, but a little bit different. Kind of that's their version of the same umbrella, but a little bit branched out. So OSMP folks help us out a lot, especially stuff in and around town. They're a good resource. again, it's not their bread and butter, so to speak, on the wildlife side. But they're pretty well versed in all things bear / mountain lion, the big human wildlife conflict kind of topics. They're pretty well versed, and we're all on speed dial for each other. If I have a question that's more in their park, I give them a call on that, vice versa. So,
Nice.
because yeah, especially if you're doing Hesse, for example, you'll see, depending where you're at, 4th of July, there's city and county, depending on who's up there. So you could see one or both rangers. They're less doing bear related stuff as far as those areas are concerned. It's not that they're a bad resource. They're maybe not the best, but any resource is better than no resource, right? And so don't feel like, oh, it's bears, I can only call Tyler and Sam. It's whoever's available at that moment in time, utilize that. And most of us know kind of our limits. And if I've reached my limit, I know who to call to get help. So to definitely utilize those. Anything else, guys? Anything you've come across? Yeah.
2 years ago, I used to live in the area of West First Street.
Mhm.
I was two houses down West First. A lady came out and told me and my kids, she said, the bear a few days ago had opened her kitchen window, crawled in, stuck in, got in the kitchen sink, and then just wandered around the house. She ran out. She's from Texas. They only live up there in the summer. She was very scary. That's what she was telling me. So how do we keep our kitchen? Because you keep food in the kitchen.
Right.
Because they had kept everything else really.
So again, it goes to the keeping them out. And so if the window's open,
And then
right, it's way in. And even if it's something that I think folks don't think about, like your vent or like if you turn the fan on over your stove, stuff like that, that blows smell around to either other parts of the house where you may think, well, the kitchen's on this side and I have a bedroom window cracked on this side, so there shouldn't, like, that smell can still waft through the house and get out. So it may not be the closest window, but if it's a window, they can use those smells. So it just comes down to keeping things clean. Like, I know people like will keep, if this is my sink and my kitchen window, and I'll have, my bottle of soap, but maybe some decorations, and then like a jar of bacon grease that I cook with it or something, like, or my spice rack is on the windowsill. Like, it's not great spots to keep those, especially in these older houses. Like, all glass is not created equal, where if you've got some older houses, older glass, it may not be as sealed as well because glass will shift over time. And so smell can be leaking out those windows. And unfortunately, those windows are also easier to break. So if a bear pushes on it, even just the weight is more likely to crack the pane than, say, a new window.
Also, this window, when we went out with it, was little, but bears, so she had never thought about being afraid of it.
Yep.
But I guess the bear just squeezed through.
Yep, similar, I won't say the same, but similar to, like if you think about trying to keep mice out, and they say anywhere a mice can fit his nose through, he can fit the rest of his body through. Bears are similar as well. If there's a will, there's a way, so to speak. And there's no way a bear can get through that. But sometimes we find smaller bears that can get into smaller spaces, or sometimes bigger bears can just force their way into spaces you wouldn't think a bear can fit through. And so anything is on the table as far as, can a bear get through that? You have to look at it pretty critically. And this includes everything from, your pet door, like a dog door, something like that, or even like a small, like a cat or small dog sized pet door. It's a way in. And even if not, I'm a bear and I can fit my paw in, a lot of those pet doors are not very sturdy as far as the support around them. And so if I start pulling, what might have started out as a pet door is now a bear door. So things like that. If you have a crawl space, they can come in underneath and come up. We've seen that. They can get pretty creative. They can dig under it, dig through it, climb over it, climb through it. Again, there's a will, there's a way. Think of that NFL linebacker with a crowbar. If he can figure out a way in, so can a bear. But what we're on the back, the front end of things, if the bear doesn't think there's food in the house, smell or not, then it's going to be less likely. Or bear says, I can smell food, but I can see and smell and hear people, and that's scary, so I'm not going to go in there. Again, that's really good, because then we have our bluff in on that bear. I think most bears are probably as scared as we are of them, but the second they realize that I don't have to be as scared of them as I am, that's when trouble starts. And so trying to keep that distance, that healthy respect, that distance away from each other, because I don't know about you guys, but I respect bears too. I get the experience where I can handle bears probably better than most people, but that doesn't mean I want to walk up and try to go and find a bear and say, hey, you, I think I can fight you and win, because that's not the case. So, but keep her bluffing on the bears and make sure that they're still scared of us. That's the big picture. But then look at your place critically, especially if you know you have bears in and around the house. Think of what might smell good to a bear. How might a bear smell things that I'm cooking inside and that smells going outside? And then having a plan, because it might be a hot day. You've got the window open, you're cooking, and that's okay because you're there to address it. But if a bear shows up thinking, oh, I think that's, that's the dinner bell. I need to tuck in the apron and get my fork and knife out for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Okay, how can I haze that bear to tell him, yes, that might be a good smell, but I'm a person and I live here and this is my area, and kind of reestablishing that you're not welcome here. So if you've never had to bang pots or pans or use an air horn or anything like that, think of, okay, well, what do I have available? How would I address that situation when it arises? Kind of have a plan, because the thing we don't want is the bear's there and you're freaking out, and the bear's like, well, I'm not too sure, but I'm going to keep inching my way closer to what smells really good. Again, hazing, addressing it that way, yelling at the bear, throwing stuff, that kind of thing. There's a lot of nuance to it, and that's where if there's a specific thing, encourage people to call us, because we're happy to have these chats, one-on-one with you or the neighbor or the whole neighborhood, whatever is most applicable. Try to avoid conflict. Any other comments, questions, concerns? It's bear related.
Do bears like to go down to the creek?
So all wildlife in generality, like water is their highway to them. That's their roadway. It's in the case of bears, water availability, more food grows, more likely to finding berries or other things that I can eat along those riparian corridors. And the same for most other wildlife species. Some are adapted more or less to that, but yeah, waterways, especially, equating this down into town, all the canyons are on the east-west directly from up in the mountains into town in Boulder, which is a geographical issue for us as far as all the roads lead to Rome. In this case is Boulder, which if bears are looking for food and they're traveling down these waterways, they're naturally going to end up in town, even if there wasn't attractants, and then they find a plethora of stuff and we have to address that. So, but yes, waterways and wildlife go together, peanut butter and jelly. So yes, good question.
And the trout and the salmon and everything else is
Exactly.
going down the creek. So that, the map that you had out, it showed Nederland.
Yep.
And there was that just one report for last year?
Yep, so each little spot is a report that
So
somebody
we have-
called in about something bear related in this case.
So in that case, at Nederland, that there was one, across the outdoor, there's a few more. That was it. That's all it was reported this one. Bear.
Yep, in an entire calendar year, those are all the bear reports we got for the area.
Wow.
And this is even generous, right? Because this goes all the way down. This is Flagstaff Road here, up towards Gross. And then this one's over Crescent Meadows. So it's more Coal Creek than this. So actual town of Nederland, we had two. I can guarantee you that somebody in town saw a bear more than twice last year. So what usually happens is the bear goes down the street and, from where it starts to where it finishes, probably 10 or 15 people saw it. And it's tough in these mountain communities because as you live up here longer, or kind of embrace the mountain lifestyle, we'll call it, you're a little more self-reliant than other folks. And so you think, oh, well, I have to stick to that and I'm not going to call for help. I'm not going to ask for help. I'm going to figure it out and do it myself. I encourage you to not do that unless properly equipped. And I want to be the one to help you with that. And so if you know all the ins and outs of mitigating bear conflict, great. Share it with the next person. And if you don't know, get that information so that one, you can be more self-reliant and you won't need to call in the future. But two, just more for the bears of, I know what to do, how to handle it. But again, that info, the flow of information, you might be the most adept person for dealing with it in the world, but if the next 9 people that bear crosses aren't, and you were the only one that was going to call, at least somebody called about it. So we have an idea. Okay, there was a bear that walked through town last night around this time. It looked like this. So it's not a shock when, oh yeah, this bear's, because what usually happens again, those calls of, oh yeah, this bear is here now doing this. Oh, and this is the 3rd time this week, and it's been doing it at least once a week for 3 months, and it goes down the list that way. That's what we want to avoid. So more information is better, even if the bear just walked through the parking lot. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's in the middle of town. We don't love that. We don't hate that. We're up in the mountains. There's going to be wildlife around. Allows us to get a better snapshot of what's actually going on versus, oh, nobody called, so everything must be hunky-dory, and I'm just going to sit here and twiddle my thumbs or go do the other things I have as part of my job. So that's what we're trying to encourage you guys to do as far as call in, report stuff. That gives us a better baseline of what we need to do, what we, Sam and I, CPW, what we can do better for you guys, for the bears.
Do y'all end up tagging any of them?
Yeah, so back to policy, if we ever have to put hands on a bear, it means I tranquilize and we're physically doing something with that bear. We have to put a tag in it. That's by policy. It's for a couple of reasons. One, so we can have a marker to track that animal. Because if it goes, for example, if we relocate it, we move it somewhere else, and that bear, there's reports of that same bear, which is identifiable by the number in its tag. We know that, okay, the bear's not learning what it needs to learn, so we'll have to address that. Versus I take this bear to an area, relocate it, another bear issue arises, but we know for sure it's a bear that didn't have tags, then we know it's not the same bear, we can differentiate. Two, bear hunting is legal in Colorado in the fall, especially depending if we were to say relocate a bear and a hunter crosses paths with that bear. One, he sees its tag and knows either one, that was a problem bear, or a bear that had a problem with people had a problem with bear. So maybe I should shoot it, or maybe because that drug is still in the system, that's part of it too. There's a date on that tag that we put. Our bodies metabolize drugs, same thing with vaccines, stuff like that. The bears do it too with the tranquilizer. We can't have a hunter harvest that animal and then consume that meat if it hasn't passed that date yet. So that's another reason for tags, is to put that date in there. If that bear's hit on a road and somebody wants to claim it, you can claim roadkill if you want to try to make those portions of meat fit for human consumption and scavenge that. You can do that legally, but again, we don't want to give you a bear that still has drug in the system in that way. So, and then second, with that policy, and it's tough because people call it a two-strike policy, which if you boil it down is a kind of accurate way to put it. But if I come across a tagged bear and I have to put hands on it again, that is the last time that bear will be handled. That bear gets euthanized. If you want to differentiate euthanized and killed, be happy to do so. Something in our language, day to day, I say euthanized because it's a little softer, but the fact is I'm killing that animal. Is where euthanized, you could argue, is more of a bear got hit and it's not going to make it, and so I'm putting it out of its misery, and that's more euthanized. But if I have to put hands on a tag bear again, that's a dead bear. I have to kill it. What gets skipped in that two-strike description is the fact that if we'd have done stuff before the bear had to be tagged, how many strikes did it get where we were trying to work around it the first time? It got tagged, and then how many times between then and the next time? So it's not, because two-strike makes it sound like all CPW cares about is putting tags on a bear for the first time, and that way, as soon as I see it again, I can kill it. It's not the case. If anything, a tag bear needs our help more because it's that much closer to the end of the road. So we as people need to step our game up and do a better job on behalf of that bear versus a bear that, not to say a bear that doesn't have tags doesn't need the same standard, but time is now even more of the essence for a tag bear. On the human side of we need to do more sooner. As far as I want to touch on relocation quick, because this is a question we get all the time. We will not move a bear from bear habitat to bear habitat, right? It doesn't make any sense. If there's reason to move a bear, there's conflict. So a conflict incident bear, it doesn't make sense for me to move it somewhere else because then we're not fixing the problem. We're just moving it and hoping it doesn't happen again. So if something happens here in town, we're not relocating that bear. We are in bear habitat. We've got bear habitat around us in every direction. So it doesn't make sense to push the can, kick the can down the road, so to speak, as opposed to fix the problem here.
Yeah.
And if it persists, we will address it as needed. Good question. Anything else, guys?
I have another question,
Shoot.
and it's not bear related.
Okay, that's all right. We'll get
Okay.
out of the weeds. That's fine.
It's elk related.
Mhm.
So you deal with all the critters and stuff.
Yep.
We moved up here in December, and we have so much wildlife in our backyard. And we had a herd of elk maybe a month ago.
Okay.
They came through, it was like 20 to 25. They came through the backyard, they're like grazing on, what they could find. And one of them had a tag 81 in its ear. So is that just like watching the migration, like?
Did it have a collar on as well?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yes.
in that case, yes, that's a little different. That is to study their movements,
Okay.
how they're utilized in the landscape, and what that gives us.
Yeah, it was on a
information.
collar. And then I was wondering about like, how do y'all make sure so it doesn't like girdle the animal? Like, do you track it down again and like loosen that
So
collar?
most of those collars, there's one of two ways. Some have like a rubber band essentially on one end of it that wears out over time and it will snap off and fall
Okay.
off. Other ones have a small, not sure the exact mechanism, if it's a battery operated. I know the old ones used to be a physical, like little small, like almost like a 22 blank charge, like a gunpowder charge
Okay.
that was time sensitive and it would go off and that way it would blow apart. Obviously not hurting the animal, but just to make sure it falls off.
Right.
But most of them, or they have the potential, the longer we can get data, we will leave them on. And so as long as those collars are still working, it doesn't make sense for us to keep them off. We can also sometimes manually send the signal for that collar to, okay,
Okay.
our study's up. That's how those get off. There's a tightness setting. That's partly why we target females between both deer and elk, because the males, the neck will swell here in the fall and the rut. And so it's hard to account for that changing, is where females will be pretty stable, full grown throughout their life. So you set it at an X distance that's still loose, we have fit X number of fingers, whatever. It will rub the fur off a little bit, but it's not to the point where it's like choking them or anything
Yeah.
like that.
Okay. Yeah, that was just really interesting because I was like watching them all come through the yard and they're just like munching. And I was like, he's got a necklace
Yep.
on, or she does,
We have roughly 20 between, so like there's two big herds, one is magnolia and then the other is caribou. And between
That's
those
where
two,
we are.
between those two herds, I think we have roughly 20, so approximately 10 each.
Okay. Yeah, because we're on peak to Indian Peaks. So that's like right caribou and whatever. And the school, the elementary school's down the bluff behind us.
Yep, so you're out in the migration kind of corridor where they're.
Yeah, where they
between-
kind of walk that ridge line too. And
With the snow melts, they'll be heading to the wilderness, and then probably starting in September, they'll start moving back down. They'll end up somewhere between Ridge Road and Pee Week.
so I had a big old moose the other day. He was 6 feet from my window.
Moose are an entirely different thing, where you can try to haze them, but
Oh,
They're
he
big-
just looked at me.
they're big and they
He was
know it,
eating
so-
aspens and he just was, I was like, okay.
yeah, you can try to haze moose, again, when it's safe to do so. People have used their car alarms with limited effectiveness, air horns with limited effectiveness. We just don't get too excited about a whole lot.
Yeah,
and
I
so
just,
they're
I'm like,
tough.
leave it alone. And I have a Saint Bernard that's 170 pounds.
Yeah,
And
that's
he's in there just
recipe
like,
for
row, row, row,
disaster.
row. And I was like, you are nothing compared to this,
Yeah, and with moose especially, so the only predator they evolved with is a wolf, and so anything that resembles that is the only thing that will get their blood going.
Um,
And almost everything that we have a negative human moose interaction, there's a dog usually off leash involved.
Yeah,
So again, if there's the key ingredient that makes things happen and you remove that, suddenly things don't happen as much.
wow.
In this case, it's the dog.
Oh, that's cool. No, I enjoyed all this.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you. Oh, yeah, yeah.
I have never called them when I've seen bears.
Mhm.
But if I see them again, I should call you, just to
Yep.
tell you.
And if it's one of those where I just saw a bear and it wasn't doing anything wrong, that can be more of an email, right? There's no time sensitivity to it versus, hey, I had a bear get into my trash can last night, or I came home from work and the bear was going through my bird feeder that morning. It's happening now, and it's a behavior we don't want to encourage. So then we can talk about how to haze, what we want to kind of make a plan to move forward so we can minimize the chance of it progressing or happening again and that type of stuff. So we do want that information, even if it's just a email, hey Tyler, Cynthia wherever, Betty Lou Who wherever, up on Mount Crumpet, saw a bear doing this at this time. It was a really big bear or a small bear, and it was a black bear or a chocolate bear or a really just a brief description. It can be just really short, 2 or 3 sentences long. I'll take that information, I'll put it in here. That just helps us keep track. And the other part of that is when something bad is happening. So we've had 20 sightings of one bear in an area, and then something bad happens, we're likely to assume it's that bear
Yeah.
versus if we have a good description of, okay, we see this bear and it's done nothing wrong, but then we saw a different bear, a clearly different bear, and it had a much different behavior. We want to be able to differentiate those bears as well.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I just see him heading to the creek.
Yep.
So I never thought about calling.
And it's, if you see it daily and it's not doing anything, just like, hey, I've seen it 3 times this week. Have a good weekend, kind of thing. So
Yeah,
Just sightings are
Yep.
just to know
Yep.
that there's a.
the more
sighting.
behavior that's associated with that, of like I saw a bear doing X, that's something we don't want it. That's maybe a phone call, call into the office, something like that, make a little more timely report. The bear's breaking into a car or into a house, like that's something we want as soon as possible. Versus I saw it going down the creek. It's good to know, and I still want to know that, but I don't expect you to call me at, I had to get up and let the dog out and I happened to see a bear. The bear and the dog didn't interact. The bear went off on itself. You don't have to call me at 2 a.m. to tell me
but
that.
because I usually, it's usually twilight, isn't it?
Especially earlier in the season. So think August and earlier, they've come out of hibernation, and between now and August, they are more that dawn and dusk and then overnight, especially if it gets hot, cooler hours.
Yeah, we have,
Um,
yeah.
They're trying to stay cool too. And then into the fall though, that's when hyperphagia, that's when we're trying to pack on the calories before we go back to sleep. And that's where they can be out feeding up to 20 hours a day. And so you could see them any time of day, especially that September, early October timeframe.
But like right now,
So yeah, right now you'll, not to say you won't, but like by mid-morning, they're pretty much holed up for the day, and then they'll come back out again as it gets later in the
But they
day.
are pretty nocturnal.
Mhm.
Well, that's good to know.
Double check, anything else for the folks online?
You're all
While we're
good.
there?
Yeah.
We'll kind of wrap it up. I'll hang out if you guys want to chat anymore, but I want to thank everybody for coming, both those that tuned in online and for you guys that are here in person. Nice to see
Yeah,
you all.
no,
Thanks for
thank you very
coming.
much.
If there's anything we can help with, bear otherwise, don't hesitate to call, and I will cut it off there. Bid you all good night.
All right, thank you, Tyler.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate it.
And what was your name?
Mindy,
Mindy.
Yeah.
Mindy.
Mindy and Maddie and
Betty, Betty,
Betty.
Betty, Mindy, Maddie and Betty.
all these, yeah,
Cause you were at the moose, one of the moose ones, weren't you?
yeah. Yeah. Because 2 nights ago, I was walking, I like to walk up Caribou.
Thank you so much
Thank you
for
so
coming.
much. I so appreciate it.
Yeah.
The first.
Yeah, to come back and walk through this during the day. That's
Where you go around
during December and.
Yeah.
Three little.
We got cool stuff going on.
This
We
is-
run.
and this is
Like
how it is.
little?
No.
Right
Yeah,
at the end of my.
But then,
road.
right
Oh, yeah?
at the end of the
Yeah,
road.
that'd be
the sun was
lovely.
coming out
Yeah.
about
Yeah,
there.
we're very excited.
Mhm.
A
Super
moose.
excited.
We have all sorts of
So there-
programs that go on. We
You
do
gotta watch.
hikes, we do
Well, yeah,
bird
that,
walks,
on the
fly
highway
fishing,
too,
all
like that is probably the
that's
deadliest
so
corner
cool.
for moose that we
So
have
we would love to have you there.
for miles either
We're
direction.
open
Probably
every
have
day of the week.
2 or 3
Okay.
moose kill
On
a
five,
year.
so you can come in.
Sorry about that.
Wonderful.
Or
That
10.
road, yeah, that road's.
Okay.
When they come down
Well,
too
thank
fast,
you.
and hit that
Yeah,
corner,
alright,
especially
alright.
late at night, right there by the RTD.
Thank y'all.
Really.
Have a good night.
Yeah, just sleep in there and.